Marcus Klein had been the kind of person people trusted with their silence. Not because Marcus was dramatic, not because he had the perfect words. It was something smaller, an ability to hold still inside a conversation, to let the other person spill themselves out without flinching. He learned it the way he learned the late-night board, by repetition, by listening until the noise in his own head quieted down. At the radio station on 8th Street, the building always smelled faintly like warmed dust and old carpet. The lights in Studio B ran a little too dim at night, as if they were trying to be gentle. Marcus liked that. It made everything feel private, even though it wasn't. He sat behind the glass with headphones on his head, fingers resting near the faders like they were resting near a heartbeat. When callers came in, their voices filled the booth and Marcus became the receiver, the interpreter, the one who said, "Okay, tell me again," when they stumbled. The show was called Midnight Letters, though it wasn't exactly letters. People called and read into the dark. They read regrets. They read confessions that sounded like jokes. They read things that made Marcus swallow and then pretend he wasn't swallowing. The station hired him because he was steady. Dorian Wells, the station's program director and sometimes reluctant guardian angel, had hired him when Marcus was between jobs. "People call in because they want to feel heard," Dorian had said during Marcus's first night. "Don't try to fix their lives. Just help them land." Marcus believed him. He did not believe he could ever be the one needing that landing. He'd built a life around not needing it. Most nights he kept his own boundaries like station rules. Don't wander from the booth. Don't chase callers outside their moment. Don't bring his own ache to the microphone. He wasn't ashamed of being the person who listened. He was just careful. Careful was safer than wanting. And Marcus wanted in small ways: food he liked, movies he could re-watch, the quiet satisfaction of getting through an 8-hour shift without his thoughts turning messy. Then Theo Ramirez arrived. It started as a professional visit. Marcus first saw Theo during the day when the station was still humming with normal life. Theo had stepped into the lobby like he belonged to a different kind of world, like he had a suit tucked into his bones even if he wasn't wearing one. His hair was dark and neat, his build athletic but not flashy, and his expression carried that polite tightness people wore when they didn't want to be perceived. He wasn't a caller, he was a client. Marcus didn't ask what kind. Dorian met him first, and Dorian never explained too much in front of him. But Marcus noticed the way Theo held his hands, not fidgeting exactly, more like keeping them ready, like he was waiting for permission to relax. Dorian's voice lowered, and Marcus pretended to adjust a stack of papers he didn't need to adjust. "Marcus," Dorian said later when Theo had gone to sign something, "Theo's sensitive. He's got questions he wants answered privately. He asked if you could cover a session after hours, like an interview but not broadcast." Marcus blinked. "What kind of questions?" Dorian gave him the expression he used when he wanted to keep someone safe without making them feel protected. "Personal." He didn't say details, just that he trusts your tone. And, Dorian hesitated, he said you'd understand why he doesn't want it public. Marcus swallowed again because sensitive sounded like danger if you were honest. He told himself, it's radio, it's words, it's just listening. Theo returned that night. Late-night air made the hallway feel colder than it should, even with the heat running. Marcus watched from behind the glass as Theo approached Studio B with a folder tucked under his arm. The folder was thick enough to be real, not performance thick. Theo stepped inside and closed the door behind him. For a moment, they both looked at the equipment like it was an altar. Marcus removed his headphones. "Thanks for coming in, Theo." Theo's eyes flicked to Marcus's face, then to the microphone, then back again. "You don't sound like you're doing this for money." Marcus almost laughed because it was such a weird compliment and such a strange way to begin. "Radio pays like it's trying to be humble," he said, "but I'm not here to sell you a fantasy." Theo's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, something like his face remembering it had muscles. "I don't want a fantasy," Theo said. I want clarity. Marcus leaned back in his chair, feeling his body settle into its usual posture of listening. Okay, tell me what that means. Theo sat in the guest chair, close enough that Marcus could smell him. Citrus soap and something faintly metallic beneath it, like keys or coins. Theo looked down at his folder, then up at Marcus. He said, I've been calling different places for months. Therapists, hotlines. One guy who sounded like a motivational speaker but kept interrupting me to ask what my brand was. Marcus's eyebrows rose. You called a brand guy? Theo's laugh came out softer than his words. I didn't stay long. I couldn't. He stopped and pressed his lips together. Marcus waited. He'd learned that stopping was part of telling. The pause was where people lived. Theo took a breath. I'm not good at saying what I need, but I keep wanting someone to hear it anyway, like there's a difference between being heard and being understood. Marcus nodded slowly. There is. Theo's eyes held his. For a second, Marcus forgot he was behind glass and noticed only the warmth in Theo's gaze, the way it didn't flinch away. Then Theo lowered his voice and added, I'm not like that. Marcus felt the phrase catch in his own throat. I'm sorry, Marcus said carefully. Like what? Theo exhaled and looked past Marcus to the wall where the station posters hung. There was a vintage photo of the first DJs, their faces frozen in a decade that felt far away. Like the kind of man who makes things complicated, Theo said. Marcus blinked again. It was the way Theo said man that made it feel like more than a sentence. Theo continued, almost reluctantly. Everyone expects me to be stable, straight, married someday. The normal path. I can do it. I can do it perfectly. Marcus didn't know if he should respond or just absorb. He chose the truth that radio taught him. Respond like you're safe. Okay, Marcus said. Then let's talk about what doesn't feel normal. Theo's fingers tightened around the folder. My chest hurts. Not like... He grimaced and waved a hand as if the shape of pain was hard to explain. It's not dramatic, it's like... I'm always waiting for something that never arrives. Marcus kept his voice gentle and level. What are you waiting for? Theo's gaze returned to him. For someone to tell me it's okay that I'm not okay. Marcus felt something uninvited move through him. He didn't expect that sentence. It wasn't what he'd been prepared for when Dorian said, sensitive. It sounded like a confession, but Theo didn't say it like a confession. Theo said it like a man testing whether honesty would get punished. Marcus leaned forward slightly, the booth light painting his face a warmer color. You're here, he said, so you already told yourself it might be okay. Theo swallowed. The movement was visible even with his throat turned slightly away. I made myself a rule, Theo said. If I ever told anyone the truth, it would have to be someone who couldn't ruin me. Marcus's heart beat harder. Ruined how? Marcus asked. Theo's eyes flicked down to the microphone, then back up. Like, I don't know. Like people would look at me differently. Like my life would be smaller. Marcus's mind tried to offer solutions, boundaries, privacy, professionalism. But he couldn't solve the feeling Theo was handing him. I can't ruin you, Marcus said. And then, because honesty mattered, he added, but I can't lie to you either. If you're afraid of being seen, I have to ask what you're actually afraid someone would notice. Theo stared at him. That stare lasted long enough for Marcus to feel awkward, long enough for the room to shift into something else. Not a session, not a professional appointment. Theo's voice dropped. I'm afraid you'll think I'm lying. Marcus's throat tightened. Theo continued, because I keep telling myself I'm straight. I keep saying it like it's a life raft. Marcus held still. And? Theo exhaled, and it sounded like giving up control. And then I listen at night to men talking. Not... He stopped and shook his head once like he could reset the sentence. When I hear them, I feel... something. I feel like I want to be touched without having to explain why. I feel like I want to be chosen. And the choosing makes me feel guilty because I don't think I deserve it. Marcus felt warmth behind his eyes. Not tears yet, but the possibility of them. He'd listened to thousands of callers. He'd heard versions of this confession, versions of this shame wearing different costumes. But hearing it from Theo, in the quiet of Studio B, with the microphone between them like a witness, made the story feel newly dangerous. Theo looked at Marcus and seemed to brace for judgment. Marcus surprised himself by smiling gently, not as mockery, but as recognition. "Theo," he said quietly, "you're not guilty for wanting. You're guilty for believing you're not allowed." Theo blinked hard. For a second he looked young. Not in appearance, he still carried that tight adult control, but in the way his face softened when someone named the real problem. Theo's voice cracked. "I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be a normal man who lives a normal life." Marcus kept his hands on the armrests, forcing them to stay calm. "Maybe normal isn't what you're missing," he said. "Maybe it's permission." Theo stared. Marcus heard the hum of the station's lights, heard the faint click of something cooling in the hallway. He heard his own breath, too loud in his ears. Theo sat back. His gaze drifted to the glass partition. "You run the board like you're reading a heartbeat," Theo said. "It's weirdly comforting." Marcus let out a small laugh because the warmth in Theo's voice made humor feel like oxygen. "My therapist says I should stop pretending faders are feelings." Theo smiled properly then, small but real. That smile made Marcus feel like he'd been granted access. Theo cleared his throat and opened the folder. "I brought questions," he said, "but I think you already answered the first one." Marcus waited. Theo slid a paper out and looked at it, but he didn't read. He just held it like an excuse to keep his hands busy. Then Theo said, "I wanted to hear you talk." Marcus frowned slightly. "On the show?" Theo's eyes lifted. "No, in person. I wanted to see if your voice has the same steadiness when it's not on air." Marcus's pulse quickened. "You trust the steadiness," Marcus said. Theo nodded. "I trust that you won't leave the room when it gets complicated." Marcus wanted to say, "I don't leave," but he didn't know if that was safe. He didn't know what Theo would do with that promise. So Marcus said the most honest thing he could without turning the booth into a confession of his own. "I do stay," Marcus said, "but you have to tell me when you need a break. I'm not going to assume you can handle it." Theo looked at him like he'd been taught a rare language. He nodded and then, quieter, "Okay." Marcus reached for the headset and set it nearby rather than on his head. He didn't want the show vibe. He wanted the two of them to feel like two men sharing a moment that wasn't for an audience. They talked for 40 minutes. Not about big answers, not about labels, mostly about ordinary things that were quietly not ordinary. What it felt like to hear laughter and pretend it didn't reach the parts of you that hurt. How it felt to be complimented and wonder what people thought they were seeing. The way Theo performed his straightness in rooms full of expectation. Theo kept returning to one detail. "I don't want to be a liar," Theo repeated. "Even if I could be whatever I am." Marcus kept hearing the word whatever and hearing underneath it less than. At one point, Theo stood up, pacing once around the booth like he couldn't sit with the conversation's weight. "I'm sorry," Theo said. "I keep thinking I'm going to say the wrong thing and then you'll regret meeting me." Marcus answered without thinking, the way you answer when your body recognizes a truth before your mind catches up. "I regret nothing," Marcus said. Theo froze. It wasn't what Marcus meant. It wasn't what Marcus planned to say, but the words landed between them like an open door. Theo stared at him, eyes wide, breath held. Marcus felt his cheeks warm. He cleared his throat. "I mean," Marcus began, trying to fix it, trying to pull the sentence back into professionalism. But Theo sat down again slowly, like he was afraid movement would shatter something. Theo's voice was softer. "You said it like you meant it." Marcus looked at him, and in that look he felt the thin line between keeping his role and being human. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus asked. Theo swallowed. "Just keep talking, like you've been talking." Marcus could hear the humor Theo used to mask depth. It was there even in the quiet. Theo always returned to practical words, questions, sessions, rules. But now the mask was slipping, and Marcus had the cruel awareness that masks only slip when something has already become safe. Dorian came by once during a check-in. He knocked and leaned in through the doorway. "Marcus," Dorian said, checking the clock and the sign-out sheet. "We're fine if you run a little late?" Marcus glanced at the screen showing the outside line status. The late show wasn't on until 11. It was only 10. "We're fine," Marcus said. Theo looked at Dorian, then back at Marcus. Dorian didn't ask questions. Dorian just nodded and said, "All right, doors stay latched. You call me if anything feels off." Theo watched Dorian leave like he'd just been handed a leash. When Dorian was gone, Theo looked at Marcus and said, almost with a smile, "Your boss is adorable in a 'I'm terrified for you' way." Marcus laughed softly. "He thinks I'm more fragile than I am." Theo leaned forward slightly. "Maybe you are." Marcus's laughter died in his throat. "Fragile?" Theo nodded once. "You listen like if you listen wrong, someone breaks. Like you're always protecting people from their own worst thoughts." Marcus wanted to deny it. He wanted to say, "That's just my job, that's just how I talk." But in the studio lights with Theo's eyes on him, denial felt like another kind of lie. Marcus stared at the microphone stand. "It's how I survive," he admitted. Theo's gaze softened. "Then let me survive too." Marcus looked up. Theo's face was serious now, not performing. "I know I'm not supposed to ask this, but I've been wanting it." Marcus felt dizzy. "What?" Marcus asked. Theo's voice lowered further, almost like the words were too intimate for air. "Can you pretend you're on the radio? Just for a second. Say something like, 'A letter. To me.'" Marcus's heart stuttered. He wasn't sure why Theo asked. To test him? To flirt? To give shape to something he couldn't say directly? Marcus should have said no. Boundaries, professionalism. The rule that the booth was not a place for private longing. But Marcus had never been good at leaving rooms where someone had already walked in with honesty. So Marcus took a breath and decided to stay human. He adjusted the microphone slightly toward himself, but not enough to turn the moment into a show. Marcus looked at Theo and said carefully, "Dear Theo, tonight you're allowed to be a person. You don't have to perform. You don't have to earn softness. You only have to tell the truth about what you want." As Marcus spoke, Theo's eyes changed. They weren't just listening, they were receiving. Theo's breath shook. That's exactly it," he whispered. Marcus felt something tear at the center of him, gentle but undeniable. Because those words weren't only for Theo. They were for Marcus, too. He had never said those words to anyone, not fully. Theo leaned forward further until his knee brushed the edge of the booth's table. The physical proximity felt like a mistake and like a miracle at the same time. Theo's hand hovered near Marcus's forearm, not touching yet. Marcus didn't move away. Theo's eyes flicked up to Marcus's face, asking permission without asking. Marcus heard his own thoughts racing. "He's a client. He's straight. He's afraid. You can't be the reason he breaks." But he also heard a different thought, quieter and sharper. "You can't be the reason you lie." Theo's hand finally rested on Marcus's sleeve. It was light. More contact than the air had offered. A test. A promise. Marcus's breath caught. He didn't pull away. He said very softly, "Theo, we can slow down." Theo nodded quickly. I'm not trying to rush you." Marcus stared at Theo's fingers on his sleeve. Then Theo looked down and laughed under his breath, the warmth of it masking the tremor underneath. "God, this is so stupid." Marcus's voice turned careful. "What is?" Theo swallowed. "That I'm acting like this is my first time feeling anything real." Marcus's stomach tightened. Theo continued, I've known what I want for a while. I've just... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't turn into self-hatred. I've been waiting for someone to look at me like I'm still worthy even if I don't fit. Marcus's throat burned. He tried to answer honestly without making Theo panic. You're worthy, Marcus said. Theo looked at him, eyes shiny now. Don't, Theo whispered, like the word might stop hope from growing too fast. Marcus didn't understand until Theo added, Don't say it like you're sure, because I can't handle it being true. Marcus inhaled slowly. The booth seemed to narrow. The microphone seemed too close, too present. Marcus realized Theo wasn't only afraid of being seen by others, Theo was afraid of being seen by Marcus. Theo took his hand back, resting it on his own thigh like he'd been caught doing something illegal. I'm sorry, Theo said. I should go. Marcus's chest tightened. Are you sure? Theo nodded too quickly. If we keep doing this, it'll become something I can't pretend is harmless. Marcus felt anger flare, not at Theo, but at the way the world taught people that wanting love was a threat. Marcus stood, slower than he felt. He opened the session notes on his desk and pretended to tidy them so Theo wouldn't see how badly his body wanted to reach. Theo stood too. They moved toward the door, both pretending the separation was ordinary. In the hallway, the station lights were brighter. It made Theo look more guarded, more like the man people would call straight. Theo paused beside the door and looked back at Marcus. I didn't come here to fall for you. Marcus blinked. Fall for me? Theo's jaw tightened. I didn't choose that, it just happened. Marcus felt the words strike him like a sudden sound in a quiet room. He forced himself to breathe. You're not supposed to fall, Marcus said, voice trembling despite his effort to keep it calm. Theo looked down, then up again. I don't want to be irresponsible with you. Marcus's humor surfaced like it always did when emotion got too sharp. Theo, you're already here in a radio studio pretending it's not a date. Theo's mouth formed a small smile, but his eyes stayed heavy. It's not a date. Marcus stepped closer, careful with distance. Then what is it? Theo's voice was almost inaudible. It's a confession I didn't know how to make. Marcus stared at him. Theo swallowed. And I'm scared you'll realize I'm not who I say I am, and you'll regret being kind. Marcus's chest ached, and he understood something. Theo wasn't asking for romance. Theo was asking for safety. But Marcus didn't know how to offer safety without also offering honesty. So Marcus took the risk he'd avoided for years. What if I'm not who I say I am either? Marcus asked. Theo froze. Marcus kept his voice steady. You don't know me beyond my show, beyond my listening voice, beyond my manners. I've been careful with my feelings, Theo. I'm not... He stopped, not sure if he was allowed to say it. Theo's eyes widened. You don't have to. Marcus felt tears threaten and hated them. He blinked hard, forcing control. He continued anyway because courage was a door you had to open before you could pretend it didn't exist. I'm gay, Marcus said. I don't advertise it. I just survive in the parts of life that don't demand proof. The hallway felt like it went silent around them. Theo looked at him as if he'd been waiting for that sentence without admitting he was waiting. Theo's mouth opened slightly, then closed. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. Then why did you sound like you were asking permission? Marcus laughed once, breathless. Because I didn't think you'd want to hear it. Theo stepped closer until they were only inches apart. I want... Theo stopped, swallowed the rest, then said it again, slower. I want to hear everything. I just don't know what I'm allowed to want. Marcus stared at him. You're allowed. Theo's eyes glistened. But if I'm allowed, then I have to admit the truth, and the truth might ruin my life. Marcus's heartbeat thudded. He wanted to say, it won't. He wanted to promise a future. But Marcus had listened to too many late-night callers to believe the world was always gentle. So Marcus offered something more honest. I can't promise it won't be hard, Marcus said, but I can promise you won't be alone in it. Theo stared. Then Theo's expression shifted. The mask slipped far enough for Marcus to see the boy underneath, the scared man who kept insisting on normal because normal was easier than grief. Theo reached for Marcus's hand. Their fingers threaded together, warm and trembling. Marcus didn't pull away. He couldn't. Theo's voice broke on the edge of laughter. This is ridiculous! Marcus squeezed his hand once. Why? Theo looked down at their hands like they were evidence. Because I came here to ask questions about my life, and instead I'm standing in a hallway with a man who probably has a better way to break my heart than anyone else. Marcus's stomach turned at the word break. He said, You're not going to break it. You're going to open it. Theo's laugh was small and wounded. That's not better. Marcus looked at him, eyes wet now. It is if we open it together. They held hands a moment longer, and Marcus felt time stretch. He could hear the station's heartbeat, distant footsteps, the building settling, a faint hum from the equipment. Then Theo pulled back slightly. I need to go home, he said, voice trembling. If I stay, I'll make this worse. I'll want things I can't explain. Marcus nodded. Okay. Theo stepped back toward the studio door. Before he left, he turned and looked at Marcus like he was memorizing him. Call me tonight, Theo said. Marcus blinked. We're already done. Theo's eyes sharpened with a kind of determined vulnerability. Not like that. Call me for real. When you're on air. I want to hear you say my name. I want to hear you treat me like I'm not a disaster. Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to say yes immediately, to agree the way love sometimes demanded. But he also wanted to protect Theo from a moment becoming a public stage. Marcus swallowed. I can't broadcast your... Theo interrupted softly. Not on air, just let me sit in the booth. Let me listen. You can be normal about it. Marcus stared at him. Theo's smile was fragile. I'll be a client. I'll be just a guy in the chair. Just don't make me pretend I'm not in love already. Marcus's breath caught. He nodded once, unable to speak. Theo left. Marcus stood in the hallway with the echo of Theo's hand still on his. He told himself it would be fine. He told himself it was just another night, another session, another listening moment. But as he walked back into Studio B and prepared the board for the show, he realized something terrifying. It wasn't Theo who had changed. It was Marcus. He'd spent years believing he could control closeness by being careful. Now he understood carefulness didn't protect him. It delayed him. At 10:57, Marcus checked the clock. He cleaned his station notes, aligned the scripts Dorian had left for emergencies, and made sure the on-air line was ready. Dorian's voice crackled over the intercom. Marcus, you good? Marcus cleared his throat. Yeah, just tired. Dorian hummed. You sure Theo's not going to be a problem? Marcus paused. He could have lied. He could have soothed Dorian with, it's fine. Instead, he chose honesty, but not the whole truth. He's not a problem, Marcus said softly. He's human. The intercom clicked. Dorian didn't respond, but Marcus heard no alarm in his silence. At 11 exactly, midnight letters began. Music faded in, quiet jazz with the keys sounding like they were trying to breathe. Marcus sat behind the mic, the red on-air sign glowing like a small sun. He greeted the listeners with his usual warmth. Hey, you're listening to Midnight Letters, he said. If you're awake, you're already brave. If you're hurting, you're not alone. Keep it kind tonight. The first caller was a woman crying about her brother. The second was a man laughing too loudly about his failed relationship. Marcus did his job. He listened. He responded. But beneath each conversation, Marcus felt Theo like a second heartbeat. He expected Theo to be in the booth. He expected the presence. He expected the physical awareness of someone he'd opened himself to. By 11:25, there was still no Theo. Marcus kept smiling into the mic. He kept answering questions that weren't his, but his internal humor wobbled. What if Theo had changed his mind? What if he'd gotten scared? What if Theo decided the honesty was too dangerous and he'd backed away like men did when the truth got real? At 11:38, someone knocked lightly on Studio B door. Marcus glanced toward the glass partition. Dorian was standing by the hallway window watching, but he didn't step in. Marcus muted the mic. "Come in," he said. Theo walked into the studio with his hoodie pulled tight, as if he was trying to hold himself together by compressing his body. His eyes met Marcus's, and the relief in his expression was so visible, Marcus almost forgot how to breathe. Theo approached the guest chair but didn't sit right away. He stood close enough that Marcus could smell him again. Citrus soap and metallic keys. Theo's lips curved. "I'm here," he said. Marcus's voice softened automatically. "Yeah, I see." Theo swallowed. "Can I stay?" Marcus unmuted the mic after the caller ended. He leaned slightly away from the microphone, turning the show into a background hum rather than a spotlight. "This isn't broadcast," Marcus said quietly. "We're between segments." Theo nodded, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "I don't want to ruin your show." Marcus couldn't help it. He smiled, a small, tired smile. "You're not ruining anything. You're the reason I'm not running away tonight." Theo's eyes filled. They sat. Theo looked at the mic as if it was both harmless and dangerous. Then he did something that made Marcus's stomach twist. Theo pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a draft message. Marcus frowned. "You wrote this?" Theo nodded. "I keep trying to rewrite it like it's a joke, like the words will be less humiliating if I pretend." Marcus stared at the screen. Theo typed as Marcus watched, slow and careful. "Please don't let me disappear after you tell me you're real." Marcus felt his breath hitch. Theo looked up. "It's too much, right?" Marcus shook his head, tears threatening again. "No, it's honest." Theo's voice was small. "I'm straight on paper. I have a life that people expect. He swallowed. "I'm terrified you'll want me to choose, and then I'll mess it up." Marcus's chest ached. He wanted to tell Theo that he didn't want a perfect choice. He wanted a real one. But Marcus knew his own heart would demand something too. He asked quietly, "When you say you're straight, do you believe it?" Theo stared at him, eyes glittering. "I believe the version of me that gets to be safe." "And the version that wants what you want?" Marcus asked. Theo's shoulders sagged. "That version keeps getting stronger when I'm around you." Marcus's hands curled around his cup of water. He hadn't realized he'd been holding it so tightly. He set the cup down carefully. He leaned toward Theo, lowering his voice so it wouldn't be overheard by Dorian in the hallway. "Theo," Marcus said, "you don't have to choose tonight. But you also can't keep using straight as a way to punish yourself." Theo's lips trembled. "I don't know how to stop punishing." Marcus swallowed and looked at the studio booth window, at his reflection faintly superimposed over Theo's face. Then Marcus turned back. "I can't do your life for you," Marcus said, "but I can be honest about what I feel." Theo's breath caught. Marcus's heart hammered as if it wanted to speak before his mouth did. "I think I'm in love with you," Marcus said. Theo stared. The room felt like it stopped moving. Theo's voice came out fragile. "That fast?" Marcus let out a small, breathy laugh. "No, not fast. Slow enough that I kept denying it to myself." Theo's eyes filled with tears he didn't wipe away. He whispered, "I'm scared." Marcus nodded. "Me too." Theo let out a shaky laugh. "We're both so stupid." Marcus's smile was wet. "Yeah, but we're stupid together." Theo leaned in slightly and Marcus leaned in too. They didn't kiss yet, not because they didn't want to, because Marcus understood that when you were brave enough to be honest, you also had to be brave enough to move carefully. Theo's forehead touched Marcus's for a second, close enough that their breaths mingled. Theo whispered, "If I'm not straight, if I'm not who I've been, What do I do with the years I spent pretending? Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about every night he'd answered other people's confessions while his own remained locked in his chest. He opened his eyes and said, "You grieve what you lost. Then you start using your time for something better." Theo's lips shook. Something like, us? Marcus nodded. Theo's breath trembled. "I don't want to be a secret. Not from you." Marcus's voice went quiet. "You won't be a secret from me." Theo nodded, and then he said the thing Marcus had been afraid of. "But I can't promise the world tomorrow will be kind," Theo whispered. Marcus stared at him. He didn't have a guarantee either. So Marcus offered the only promise that didn't require lying. "I can't control the world," Marcus said, "but I can control whether I show up for you." Theo looked at him like Marcus had just offered a hand over a cliff. Theo reached for Marcus's fingers and laced them together again. And then, as if the studio air itself was testing them, the on-air timer chimed. A caller line beeped. Dorian's voice came in through the intercom. "Marcus, we're back. You ready for the next segment?" Marcus swallowed. He knew he had to go back to being the listener. But his feelings were no longer hidden in his chest. He looked at Theo and whispered, "Stay quiet. Listen." Theo nodded. Marcus turned toward the microphone and put on his show voice, warm humor masking the deeper ache of being seen. "All right, you're still awake," Marcus said. "Let's do this gently. What's on your mind tonight?" Theo stayed in the guest chair, eyes on Marcus's profile. The caller talked about dating apps. Marcus responded thoughtfully. But Marcus could feel Theo's gaze like a hand at his back. After the caller hung up, Marcus leaned closer to Theo. Theo's voice was a whisper, like he was afraid the station might steal the moment. "Do you regret telling me?" Marcus shook his head. "No, even if it hurts." Theo swallowed. "Because now I can't unknow you." Marcus's throat burned. "And I can't pretend I don't want you." Theo looked down at their hands, then back up. He said, "Can we leave?" Marcus blinked. "Leave?" Theo nodded. Not as in never come back, as in, can we walk out of this booth like two people who want each other, not like two people who used a microphone as a disguise? Marcus stared at him. Leaving meant consequences. Leaving meant admitting this wasn't just talk. Marcus could hear his own caution, his own fear. What if Theo panicked and ran? What if Theo tried to retreat into normal the moment they got outside? But Marcus also remembered what Theo had asked. Permission. Permission to be real. Marcus reached up and brushed Theo's cheek with the back of his fingers, slow and gentle. "You can't promise me forever," Marcus said. Theo's eyes widened slightly. "I can't." Marcus nodded. "But I can ask for one night without pretending." Theo's breath hitched. Then Theo smiled, tiny, frightened, hopeful. That's all I want, too." Dorian knocked gently through the hallway window. "Marcus, you're holding a long pause. You good?" Marcus pulled back. He forced his voice to sound normal. "Yeah," Marcus called. "I'm just talking." Theo stood with him, close enough that Marcus could feel his warmth. They moved slowly toward the door. At the last second, Theo stopped. He turned back toward the microphone like it was an old friend and a dangerous temptation. Then Theo took Marcus's hand and placed it lightly over his own heart. "I don't want to be straight if straight means lying," Theo said. Marcus swallowed hard. "I don't want to be gay if being gay means losing the people I love," Theo added, voice trembling. "So I'm scared. I'm not brave the way people make it sound." Marcus stared at him, and the truth felt heavy but warm. "Bravery isn't flawless," Marcus said. "It's just choosing honesty even when you shake." Theo nodded. Then Theo opened the studio door and stepped into the hallway light. Marcus followed. Dorian was there, leaning with his arms crossed, eyebrows raised but expression kind. He looked between them. "Are you two done for the night?" Dorian asked. Marcus smiled a little, trying to keep it light. Almost, Marcus said. Theo's voice was steadier now, like the honesty had made him stronger. We just need a minute. Dorian watched them for a beat and then nodded slowly. Okay, Dorian said, but don't let it turn into you disappearing into your cars. I can't be responsible for heartbreak. Marcus's laugh broke free, warm, relieved. Theo's smile softened. Dorian stepped aside. Marcus and Theo walked out of the station into a late-night street that smelled like rain and asphalt. The air was cooler, crisp against Marcus's face. Theo's hand found Marcus's again. They moved toward Theo's car, and Marcus tried not to imagine all the ways the night could break them. But Theo surprised him. When they reached the passenger side door, Theo didn't rush to open it. He turned to Marcus and held his gaze. Say it again, Theo whispered. Marcus blinked. Say what? Theo's throat moved as he swallowed. That you don't regret it. That you're not asking me to be someone else. Marcus felt his eyes sting. He stepped closer until Theo couldn't avoid the closeness. I don't regret it, Marcus said, and I'm not asking you to be anyone but yourself, even the parts you're still learning. Theo exhaled hard. Then he leaned forward. This time, Marcus didn't hesitate. Their kiss was gentle, warm, and careful, like it was built out of permission rather than hunger. Theo tasted like the citrus soap on his lips, and like the nerves he hadn't been able to hide. Marcus pulled back first, breathing too fast. Theo rested his forehead against Marcus's again. Promise me one thing, Theo whispered. Marcus swallowed. What? Theo's voice was quiet and fierce. If I text you in the morning and I chicken out, don't stop listening, just help me land. Marcus nodded. I'll help you land. Theo smiled, tired and relieved. They climbed into the car. Marcus didn't know where they were going yet. Theo hadn't planned it aloud, and Marcus didn't ask. He knew planning could become control, and they were both learning to let honesty lead. As Theo turned the key and the engine hummed, Marcus looked at Theo's profile in the dashboard light. Theo glanced at him and smiled softly. Still think I'm complicated? Theo asked. Marcus laughed under his breath. You're not complicated. You're just brave enough to be scared. Theo's smile widened. Then Theo reached over and took Marcus's hand again, holding it like it was the only rule he trusted. The car pulled away from the curb, and that night Marcus didn't pretend he was just a man running a radio show. He was a man who wanted something real. Somewhere in the distance, the station's lights kept glowing, like a promise that late-night confessions could become morning ones if you were courageous enough to stop using silence as a shield. Theo looked at him one more time before the road swallowed them, and Marcus realized the real cliffhanger wasn't whether the world would accept them. It was whether they would keep choosing honesty when the fear tried to make them disappear. He squeezed Theo's hand and leaned closer, letting the night hold them, until they both had to face the morning.